Yeah, whenever it's his time, I'll just kind of, yeah. What? Yeah, for him, yeah. Cool. Okay. All right, welcome to We Are the Artillery, using Google Foo to take down the grids. Hope you like my old school graphics there. I'm Chris Sistrunk. You might know me from Twitter. I talk about RS-232, dad jokes, SOC status, things like power grid stuff, and control system security. The other two presenters that are listed there, SynAc and Krypt3ia, they both had to make last-minute cancellations and they could not come. And unfortunately, it's due to some family reasons. So I have got another presenter that you may be familiar with. And but SynAc he does the same thing. He's in ICS security. Krypt3ia, he's a curmudgeon at rants, but he's also interested in national security issues and open source intelligence. And we have a redacted guy.
Hi, I'm redacted guy. Lots of control system experience and doing things online. I can computer, just so you know.
He can. So We Are the Artillery kind of was born because Asobi said something kind of in response to I Am the Cavalry. So we are the artillery. And so I Am the Cavalry, if you're not familiar with what they do, they're trying to work at getting things done on the government level and up at high level. We're on the front lines. We wanted to do something, hey, let's see if we can find things that don't belong there, that are insecure, and maybe do something about them. So we like to say that we're the I Am the Cavalry's little brother. What to expect from this presentation? We'll show how effective a team of individuals can be in using open source intelligence gathering and gathering this data about in this case, the electrical systems, then also trying to see how we can make this better and get some of it taken off the internet. And there's a lot of things that you can connect together if you know electrical engineering, if you know systems about transmission, distribution, things like that. How many people in here are familiar with electric grid at all, or work for a power company or something like that? Okay, a fair number. Okay, so we've seen things. First of all, we want to dispel the media hype that's been out there for the last several years. They like to get a lot of clicks. There's a book Ted Koppel wrote about lights out, and there's a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt about the power grid. And they would say, the grid is going down. American Blackout was a show that National Geographic Channel. What would you do if the whole country went dark?
Has anyone actually seen any of those episodes, or were fearful to turn on their lights the next day? Anyone here? No? Okay.
Yeah. So the amount of hype is too damn high. If you don't know who that is, that's Rob Lee. So me and him like to talk about bringing it back to the real world. Is how would it really be? So it's not really a grid, it's a quilt. There's, in the United States and Canada, there's 5 grids, to be honest. There's not the grid. So here's some facts I put together. There were some news articles that came out earlier this year that were, creating a lot of fear. Oh, the Russians got into the grid, and it's, basically it was down to one view-only operator station. It wasn't even a critical site. Wouldn't have affected anything. but the media blew it up out of proportions. And back in July this year, I decided to create these, pull these statistics. So there's 5 grids: Eastern Interconnect, the Western Interconnect. Texas has its own. Go Texas. Alaska, they have their own. And Quebec. Some people may say Florida has their own, but they are still connected to the Eastern Interconnect. There's over 3,000 power companies. How many people knew that? It's not just one power company or one power grid. There's 2,000 publicly owned, so it's like public power. They're little small companies that have maybe 50,000 customers or smaller, and they're everywhere. 890 plus co-ops, electric co-ops. It's another type of power company where they have members, where you pay to be a member of that co-op. 210 plus power marketers, so where there's a deregulation, they can market power. So like in Texas, for instance. And then 180 plus investor-owned utilities. So that's the big publicly traded investor-owned. They're the big ones that you think about. And then 9 federal. Let's talk about oversharing. So because a lot of these companies are governments or municipals or related to that, and there's also public requirements about projects that are going to be built for the power grid, different transmission lines, different generation plants coming online. There's a lot of information that could be shared publicly. Some of this is due to the open government policy and also the Freedom of Information Act. There's a couple of others as well, but critical information doesn't have to be public, but...
Yeah, so for anyone who actually works in regulatory compliance of utilities, NERC has defined critical infrastructure information, and that actually is not subject, for most cases, to be by FERC allowed to be a Freedom of Information Request Act once it's marked that way, so properly marking it. But utilities also just will release information, or sometimes just in general, companies, not even just utilities, release information that they probably should not have released.
Right. So a city municipal may be part of that city government or a county government, and they'll have things where they'll post information about their budget that they make public, and they'll post information about some of the projects, capital projects, like about roads or other things like that. Sometimes they'll post information about their power grid as well, and those systems related to that, because it's a public bid process, things like that. So where we're coming is, as we are the Artillery, we wanted to find some of these publicly shared information and try to get that stuff redacted or taken down to help protect us as a society. The great thing about electricity is even evil folks like power. So we're just trying to help protect against the crazies out there, the lone wolves out there, and the folks that just don't care, and then also nation states that may want to get an upper hand in time of conflict of some kind. So this is kind of our methodology. The first thing, if you've ever done open source intelligence, you will kind of see this is kind of familiar to you. But for the power sector, things that we see is like a vendor or an asset owner publishing a press release that, hey, we bought this system and it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, or it costs $10 billion, and it's, they'll have a picture of them out beside it, showing how proud that they are.
Yeah.
Often,
I was going to say, when I do pen testing for utilities, this is one of the first places I look to see what kind of potentially systems that they own and use and what I may want to target. And then later on, when we're talking about, say, job postings, LinkedIn and things like that, you can start confirming those things. but you can see how much they spent, how much important it is. And a lot of utilities will also use multiple vendors, so you can start finding multiple vendors that are the current, and that, or some of the ones that may be even older and aging that way, because even older press releases from the company on their website or in media's websites become very important when you start looking for this information.
Right, and Flickr is a good example of social media.
Yeah, so at DEF CON 23 Fail Panel, there was a really great presentation that was in there that showed a utility's Flickr account. That Flickr account posted pictures of internal to control rooms, and then also in high res, super high res, so you could zoom in and see things like what things were set at, what OS they were running on the machine way in the background, or even what the CEO's badge looked like, because it was facing the camera in most of the pictures. Yeah,
so we worked to back then to help get that taken down. We contacted that company and also folks like ICS CERT and EnergySec and EISAC. We had a multiple-pronged approach, and they took those pictures off of their Flickr account. Unfortunately, the Wayback Machine has them, if you know where to look.
That and anyone else who thought it was interesting and saved them.
Yeah. LinkedIn is another one. There's a lot of companies that have posting policies about LinkedIn, what you post to LinkedIn, but a lot of people don't follow it, from not just the power industry, but hospitals and just you name it. They'll post about what type of control system that they're familiar with, what they have training on. Actually, on an engagement for my current job, I didn't know what some of the systems that they had, but because they had poor documentation, and so I was able to find out through open source intelligence what systems that they had before we came on site, things like that. So it's sometimes an engineer or a technician may not understand. They're just talking proud about their job and what they know, but they don't realize how critical the information could be to someone who might get it. It might be in the wrong hands.
Yeah, most everyone, including us in this room, try to use LinkedIn as a marketing tool for ourselves. So you want to, if you're looking for a job, say in industrial control system engineering, you're going to start listing all the products and logic types that you're familiar with and how to show that you can do it. And a lot of companies don't audit, even though they have policies, as Chris mentioned. They don't have policies saying, or they have the policy, but they don't have people going and auditing. There are thousands of employees' LinkedIn profiles to make sure that they didn't put company-specific information.
Yeah. So another example is conference presentations such as a Distributech. It's a very large transmission and distribution conference. About 20,000 people attend that. And a lot of these companies talk about their expertise, and rightly so, they should, and share that within the community. But a lot of times those presentations may have sensitive information, or and they're all public after the conference is over. Job postings is another one. I mean, you have to say what you're going to hire for, but sometimes there's too much information shared in a job posting. Open shares, terabyte drives on the internet, open FTP servers. We find a lot of these. Google indexes them, and so if you know how to use Boolean search, and it's called Google dorking, right? You can find really sensitive information out there, and it might be because they don't have a business or security policy that prevents them from putting that online. So it might be a smaller power company that's not under NERC CIP regulation requirements. And when we get outside of in industrial control systems that are not regulated outside of NERC CIP regulation or NRC for nuclear or CFATS for chemical, it could be the wild, wild west. Unless that company has they're proactive in their security, that you'll find a lot of things that, we're just trying to help back up stuff, and they didn't know.
Yeah, I worked for a company once, and it's a place where you wouldn't think to find that company's information, but they had an intern from university. That university intern then posted his documents that he was working on sensitive information to his publicly available share on the university's website. So if you didn't look on the university's website, you were never going to find these documents. Luckily, I found them. It took a little bit of talking to. The university was more than willing to remove the files from their servers. However, Google was not so happy to remove it from all their indexing. It's a document you didn't want to see.
Right.
So you just have to think outside the box and sometimes keep looking for information.
And the last two, open misconfigured websites, lots of caches of documents that, just poor security on that website, for instance. And it's not very locked down or password protected or, even two-factor. There's a lack of that. Weeding, that might be a term for some people, but in this instance, it's using keyword searches and following the trail. See where you go. How far down the rabbit trail can we go? So here's an example of NRC. All of their documentation is generally public, and mainly so for the general population trust of that and being open and transparent. So here's a technical document on a TriConnect system. It's a safety information system, and you can just Google it, and it's available on NRC website. That's just one example of information that we can find.
And this would have been 2014, late 2014, early 2015. HD Moore and Rapid7 published some results for gas monitoring systems that were exposed online. SynAc at the time was finding these in Shodan because Shodan had just implemented a query and was able to then, you could start finding who they were because it had the street name or the complete address of where that station was located. So part of what the We Are Artillery was trying to do in this case was we were going to call them and try to let them know that their stuff was online, and like new research had come out, so they were probably going to start seeing attacks. Later in 2015, two really great researchers came up with a honeypot that monitored these, and they talked at Black Hat. 2015, really great researchers.
Totally the best. So Shodan is by far has been talked about a lot. Hopefully, if you're not familiar with it, there's a lot of industrial control system protocols that use the protocols as they were designed to query the internet for those devices, and using protocols that are specific to a vendor, and also open ones like Modbus or DMP3.
Yeah, in 2013, if you want to go back to DerbyCon archives, 2013, a really great researcher did a presentation about how he worked with Shodan and implemented Modbus, Ethernet IP, DNP3, BACnet, so on and so forth, into Shodan. So really great research. Go look that one up too.
So this is one of the ways that, besides using Google and other methods of open source intelligence to get information about what is out there, what's connected to the internet. So the next phase of this open source intelligence process is we want to pivot into more rich in environment and data. So engineering firms, a lot of times engineering firms will put out a public bid process with whatever company they're building for, maybe an airport or building a college building or jails or whoever, and they'll put their bid documents on public FTP, and they'll have the schematics, construction pictures. We found no telling how much stuff that's not even related to the power grid. We found Air Force Base SCIF plans. We had to work with them to get that stuff taken down. We found RFPs, contract information, capital projects or upgrades specific to the power grid there's this open access same time information system, OASIS. And a lot of times, anytime a new transmission line is going to be built, they have to post a document to the OASIS page, and they will share the location of this substation or the location of this generator. So it's a non-competitive, since most of the transmission it has to be open access. So no one has a competitive advantage in the electric market. So a lot of times in the past, you would see way too much information about, not just the breakers and the voltage and things like that. That's normal, but it would show you exactly what vendors, even sometimes network schematics or IP addresses in these public OASIS documents. I help work with a couple of companies to help get these taken down and implement a process to look for this kind of extra sensitive information and prevent it from being shared in the future. Now that the OASIS systems, they are very vetted, but again, a lot of the little distribution companies that are small, the thousands of those, they don't really deal with OASIS a whole lot. It's mainly the transmission and generation companies. And another one is maps. So there's open source map of every transmission line out there. SynAc Pone has tweeted about this a lot, and we just took a screenshot today of the transmission lines around Louisville, just as an example. And there's this one's called ArcGIS. There's several other maps out there.
Yeah, and you can zoom in, find substations, then overlay that over, or in some cases they actually overlay on Google Maps already, so you can just switch to satellite view. You can see kind of what equipment's there, what size it is, a lot of that information, the size of the transmission line, the substation, and things like that are also publicly available.
Also, not for just North America, but also Europe as well. There's maps for those as well, and they're verified by satellite photographs as a verification that they're there. Because you can, if you really know what you're looking for on Google Maps with the satellite view or Bing Maps with the satellite view, you can follow the transmission lines out.
Chris, wasn't there a company that made a report that said they ran all this information and said that in 5 key locations they could take out the entire power grid?
Yeah, it was 9, yeah. And so there was an effort by We Are the Artillery to try to find out what those 9 potential power substations would be. And SynAc Pone and I, we tried to figure out what it would be. You helped as well, and we all came up with slightly different answers, but that was about 3-4 years ago, something like that. And the reason why we're waiting so long to talk about it is because we want to make sure that there's a good enough delay in this information. A lot of it is sensitive, but it's also public. We think that the transmission grid has changed a fair bit since then, so that number is probably completely different. But that was something that was of concern to us. We tried to replicate which of those substations would be that critical to take down the grid. But again, it's not that easy. I'm an electrical engineer. I used to work for a power company. You really have to be involved in a lot of this stuff on a daily basis to even get your head wrapped around how transmission power flows and how distribution power flows to get to those critical numbers. And that job is something that very few people, I doubt anyone in here has done it. If you have, we can talk later. So continuing, context, getting more information about those control systems. So vendor support portals, so if you have a vendor X and you want to get the user manuals, a lot of people would sign up, for that, showing what company they work for, and this is the systems we have, we'd like to get this user manual. Some control system vendors don't really vet who signs up for this support portal. Electric companies in the U.S., that has changed, so you can't just willy-nilly sign up. For instance, Schweitzer Engineering Labs, they make a lot of relaying and substation equipment that has cybersecurity components. They actually vet you to make sure that you're an actual product owner, have a purchase order before they'll let you have access to the portal.
That's made our job a lot harder, so it sucks.
But there's others out there that do not have that level of rigor, and a lot of this stuff you can find. You can find application configuration software on these websites, firmware. Another one is, again, these user guides scribed. A lot of people upload their documents to Scribed, and we found documents that we couldn't find any other way because someone, they thought it was a good idea to upload it to that website.
Yeah, I've found company-specific user documentation from a vendor in Scribed.
So here's an example. Today I just did a Google search, a Scribe search on a smart meter, and this is one that you might see used in Asia. But it shows the whole technical manual, and it gives you all of the setup steps and the passwords and all that stuff, default information about how it's configured, about what it does. I'll let you think about what other things you could search for. If you can imagine it, it's pretty much on Scribed. So firing for effect, ready, aim, fire. How do we make contact with these companies, whether they're pwned or not? Maybe they've done it to themselves and put this stuff in a terabyte, FTP anonymous login. And how would we try to get this stuff taken down? Here's the problem. A lot of times, I did the search today. Here's a Schweitzer Engineering Labs meter that's used for residential and also in substations, and they measure voltage, amps, and watts, watt hours on a distribution feeder. For instance, you'll see all of these are registered to Verizon wireless IP ranges. So it's really difficult to find out who owns those, because Verizon Wireless does not have a list of what companies those are. We've tried to contact them in the past, and so has ICS CERT.
Yeah, so what happens here, from experience in the consulting for these companies specifically, is they are hidden, or not hidden, but they're exposed via cell gateways. A lot of times, companies thought they were buying from Verizon or AT&T or any of the other a private connection just to interconnect between two locations. The configuration on Verizon, AT&T, or any of the other mobile providers, they configured it to be just on the internet, and no one came back and checked. In some cases, that's not the case, and they just didn't realize that exposing things on the internet's a bad idea.
Yeah, and you'll see that these are still running Telnet, clear text, right? So it's those might be not a NERC-CIP related type company. It might be one of those smaller mom and pop electric companies. Again, I picked this device. It doesn't have any control, so if you did try to do something, or an evil attacker might try to do something, it might just change what's reading or change some of the configuration, but it won't affect lights going out. Another thing that SynAc Pwn did was trying to map IP blocks to utilities and who owned what utility. It can be done, but he was trying this as part of the We Are the Artillery effort, and it's a pretty big deal, because he had, you have reached your query limit on this. If you feel this is an error, we'd like a commercial API, please contact us. So doing all these queries.
And we never really actually finished it. There's a lot of things that look like utilities that may not be utilities. So what we did was take the list of those 3,000 companies and then try to map them to a register. That register then may or may not actually exist. I've worked for companies that were on that list, but then you can never find them as a registration because they're just buying the internet and then hosting their own website on an Azure, AWS, or somewhere else in the cloud now. So it makes it a little more difficult to find an actual affected person if it's not in their own IP space, or even in some cases, if they are a registered company and they have no IP space.
Right. Here's another example. I found some substation communication processors. Some people might call them an RTU, remote terminal unit. They belonged to a distribution company. I knew that because of the way the login page showed, but I did not know who it belonged to. Similar case, they had Verizon or some other wireless company was the owner of that IP space. But fortunately, the login had the serial number of that device. So I contacted the vendor of that device and I said, here's the list of serial numbers you have. And they said, oh, we know exactly whose customers those serials belong to. So that same day, they contacted those customers, and later, within less than a week, all of those substation devices were taken offline. So that made me feel really good about that, and so I tweeted about it a little bit. Kermit, when we find stuff on there, like, oh boy, that should not be on there. I can see Vis. I tweeted about Vis earlier, and he's got it going, oh, this shouldn't be on the internet. And if you see any of Vis's prior talks about finding stuff that shouldn't be on the internet, it's quite entertaining. Several at DEF-CON. So another one we found was a SCADA engineer. We knew he was a SCADA engineer because of the information that was on his anonymous FTP login. He had backed up his entire work laptop to his terabyte drive at home. And it had things like substation configuration backups, manuals. He had this spreadsheet of doom in Excel about all the different projects he was working on, things like that. So SynAc Pone and I, we were able to find his, it was pretty easy to find out who he was because it was his personal backup drive. So we got his cell phone number or his home number. I don't remember which one. So we decided, well, how are we going to reach this guy? We need to tell him. So SynAc Pone was like, well, let's just cold call him. So we got a throwaway Google Voice number and called him. And he's like, hello? Hi, we're from the internet. We found some things that are on your backup drive that probably shouldn't be there. And he was like, okay, click. And he didn't say anything. He just hung right up. And we checked about 10 minutes later, that was taken down. Again, it's not one of these NERC-CIP regulated power companies. It's one of these smaller companies. They're just trying to do their job, and they don't have any, experience in, security training, perhaps, and they don't know about this. And another example is Kill Switch. We did the same thing. We were going after the Rockwell Automation PLCs that were on Shodan. Again, they have the serial numbers for each one on Shodan. And we gathered them all up and we reported it to Rockwell, which is Rockwell Automation and Allen Bradley. They have a security place and they've done a lot of good things. But unfortunately, they don't keep track of what serial number went to what user, because they have a reseller system. And so that was a big problem. And so we weren't able to go to the Verizons, and we worked with ICS-CERT. We were all trying to figure out how to get these taken offline, because they could be in things like power plants or refineries or who knows what.
Unfortunately, their PLCs are used everywhere too, so it's kind of hard to determine the criticality of them when the same PLC can be running a nuclear plant or a dairy farm. Right.
So if you guys come up with any other ways to do this, we recommend responsible disclosure. I know there's some people that don't agree with that, but this is my stance. Dr. Krypt3ia, if you follow him, this is me and him at the Hoover Dam at DEF CON this year. So he couldn't be here. but he wanted to share a couple of stories where he found a hydroelectric dam's internal systems, like 2 clicks away from taking control over the dam. And he was able, and it's not the one that's pictured here, so it's not the Hoover Dam. So he was able to talk to the people there, get them to understand how important it was, and they had that stuff taken off of the internet that same day. So that was a great success. Another one, he Googled Earth, a nuclear facility, and he was able to find like a document trove that was there. Inside that, there was a bunch of different folders, he said, and it had one of the red team pen tests of that nuclear facility there, which that would be a gold mine for an attacker to find out some of the weaknesses in a nuclear plant. But fortunately, he reported it, and it was taken down that same day as well. So this is the kind of thing that we have been doing with We Are the Artillery. We know that there are others out there doing the same thing. So we consider you part of We Are the Artillery as well. So tango down. Another one from SynAc Pone. He found a website for a generation facility and was able to go and change some of the stuff on their website. So if you can't really read, it says, "We Are Legion, powered by the threat butt," on the screen there, and was able to report that. And apparently he also copied Garrett Burke, who was a reporter for AP.
I think this was around the time AP had made a story almost utilizing the same system. They were able to find it and then expose some of the findings straight back to AP.
Okay, what can be done? So go OSINT yourself if you're an electric utility. Use all these different methods to find out about yourself, about your users, especially your technicians and your engineers that may not get security training as often, or maybe not be exposed to security training as often.
You don't even have to be in the electric industry to do that.
Absolutely.
Do it for every company. Company I work for, I found the internal diagrams and building schematics of their entire building on the vendor who designed the building, or designed it, was trying to use it as a marketing tool. So all the internal pictures of where certain conference rooms, where the server room was, things like that, were all exposed on another person, or on the architect's website. So you just gotta dig out there and keep looking. Sometimes, like, especially for industrial control systems, a lot of people don't know a lot of the terminology, keywords, and things like that you're trying to look for when you're mining through the documentation of what's important, what's not important. So it's really good to brush up on anything that, can help you look at, or even understand why a criticality of a single line diagram. What's this single line diagram? Why is it important while that one wasn't? Right. Those kind of things really need to start paying attention to if you're starting to do open source intelligence in this, and start digging into why it's critical or not critical.
And we keep beating on this. It's going to be an issue. Humans like to make shortcuts. They like to make things easier. It's always that balance of security versus usability, right? So we're just trying to say that we probably won't stop talking about this. We probably won't find, we'll keep finding this stuff on the internet or exposed where it shouldn't be. Be open to random warning emails. So we have emailed several clients, or not clients. We have emailed several asset owners or government utilities, and they're like, "Go away," or they wouldn't respond at all. Then they weren't taking our warning serious until we escalated it through ICS CERT or US CERT, NKIC, any of those. We found a city in Florida that it's been fixed and taken offline, but they had their entire city SCADA, everything backed up. So we contacted them, and they were not too receptive at first, but then we had to get the others involved, and we've finally they understood, wow, this is something that's serious, and we take it down. Be open to those random emails if you are working for a company. Some security by obscurity would be nice. That's what SynAc Pong said. Don't make it so easy to find things. But again, people that want to find out things, they're going to be persistent enough and find ways to find your information.
Yeah, and even with security via obscurity, it's nice. It prevents some of the script kiddies from getting it. But those who know what they're looking for will still be able to find it. So it's a good place to start, but keep going.
Right. Also, too, another thing that we really want to stress is get security education and training for non-NERC SIP electric utilities, so the little guys. And I know that there are several other security companies out there that have done free training on the spot or taken to do a control system security analysis or assessment like a pen test. They've done it pro bono for those power companies, which is a great thing because we're all going to have to try to help.
You mean pretty much what we've been doing?
Well, yeah, but this was under that company. Yeah. We're all doing it because that's what we love to do.
You'd be surprised when you start looking at these things. Another person who's not listed on this, and myself, we found it was more or less a mom and pop hydro facility in redacted state. And it was really, really hard to actually contact them as well. It was actually they owned a generation unit that was on their property. They sold it to the local utility, but you can control the entire hydroelectric facility, including opening up the spill gates, all from online. And so those were ones that we worked pretty quick to try to contact them. And they're like, sorry, we outsourced that, and that guy wants that stuff online via VNC. Right.
Yeah.
Please don't do that.
Yeah.
And so again, like as Chris said, one of those things unreceptive, but you still need, then we went to ICS cert, then escalated it to it, and you can't find it online anymore. So I'm assuming they took care of that problem.
All right, we're coming to the end here. So we have some shout outs besides SynAc, Pong, and Krypt3ia, who couldn't be here. Asobi, who helped us, and he still helps us, Vis, DA667, Kill Switch, Prano, Munin, To the Hill, and a bunch of others that's out there behind the scenes.
And you.
And you, yes. So we've got some time to take questions. Yes. Let's see if this thing is on. Here we go. Question.
What up, dude?
Someone light a fire back there?
Like, fucking, I'm out of here. So you had mentioned how you called the one dude and said, hey, all your stuff's online, take it off, and he hung up on you and then took it off, and then other people doing the same. Have you been threatened with legal? I mean, I assume like you would cover your ass, but have you been threatened saying, well, like they get pissed off at you or whatever?
No. The way we do it, we try to make it clear of who we are. We state our credentials, and so far we have not seen we have not been threatened in this aspect, at all. Question over here.
In this aspect.
Well, on fuzzing and stuff like that with Project Robust, people got upset. Yeah.
So I know it's not typically the goal when you're doing responsible disclosure. I kind of do the same thing for the aviation industry a little bit. But have you all ever been compensated at all, or had any opportunities opened up for further engagement from anybody that you've ever assessed or enabled?
No, and nor will we ask it as well. We're doing this because it's altruistic. We are here because it helps us sleep better at night.
If somebody actually came to us and said, hey, we realize we have a problem, can you help us? I'd probably reference another company.
Hey, how's it going? You guys mentioned that you guys reached out to ICS to escalate. How hard is it to contact them?
They have a public contact page and a phone number with a 24/7 help desk or hotline. So it's pretty easy to contact them. Same with ISAC, the electric ISAC in DC.
Did you ever have to actually? Did they ever do anything about things? Have you ever had to escalate it to ICS or someone like that, and they actually took action?
Yes, absolutely.
And what have they done?
So again, where we had a city municipal that had their entire stuff online, also with this Flickr account for a large utility. In both of those cases, they helped reach upper management and also technical management to get that stuff taken down. And even though we couldn't do it, we helped get that initial conversation going. Any more questions? If you don't want to talk in public, we can get you in the side, outside in the hall. There's one over here. No question? Okay.
Well, now you got
Were
one.
you just stretching?
All right, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.